Okay, welcome back. This is week 16 in a 16-week course, so we're at the end. This week is all about doing the final exam. It's not going to be any more, no additional content, no lecture. We're just going to do a review to help you study for the exam. So let's talk about kind of what we'd expect. I kind of expect that you're going to review this topics list. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. It basically gives a better explanation of the things I want you to study for. Okay. Review my lecture notes. Yes, that would be an excellent idea. For those of you who haven't been paying much attention and haven't been using lecture notes, shame on you. I've mentioned to you several times that this is where I am, like for example, when I'm writing the test questions for Chapter 9, I am looking at this list as I'm making the exam. So I'm sitting here going, for example, right here I might say, so does an XML schema look just like a database schema? I mean, I'm picking the questions off this page, okay? Whew. So if you don't bother to read them, hey, what the heck? Watch these review videos, which you're obviously already doing, and then study for and do your exam. Okay, so the rules are about the same as last time, the midterm. So let's just go through it. So this is not comprehensive, meaning, you know, the midterm was half the course and the final is the other half. It's open book, open notes, open internet, open everything. There's nothing there. There's 50 questions in a pool, but you're only going to get 40 of those. I never know which 40 you're going to get. I don't know what order they're going to appear in. And then there's going to be 2 extra credit questions that everyone gets. And those are all the same. The chapter and page numbers are shown there to help you study. A no in the text, in the no column, means it either wasn't talked about adequately or perhaps it wasn't talked about at all in the textbook. So that means you must refer to your notes that you took while you were watching the lectures. Just kind of a note that about 20% of the material is stuff that we talked about that isn't specifically talked about in the book. The time is short. You got an hour and 15 minutes. If you do the math, including, 42 questions, including, the extra credit, that's 1 minute and 47 seconds a piece. That is quick. Now that you might think, oh my God, that's just unfair. Well, look at it from my perspective. I want to know that you have learned something, okay? I want you to be able to say, oh, I got that, okay? So the purpose of this exam isn't to determine your skills in looking up answers, okay? That would be some other course. That'd be a course on research methods or something, right? This is a course on Excel. So I want to know if you know something. Now, knowing the answer to a question takes 15 seconds. So what I would recommend, if you're one of those people who kind of panic over the amount of time you have, is to go through and answer the ones that you know for sure. You go, oh, I got that one. I remember that one. Boom, the answer is 12. Boom, and move on. And get all of those. When you run across one that you know you're going to have to look up, or you come across the questions, you go, oh, geez, I don't remember. I'm going to have to look that one up. Write it down on a piece of paper and move on. And then get all the ones that you know, and then go back and get the ones that you have to research. That way, when it comes time to having to look up a question, you can spend 2 or 3, 4, 5 minutes looking up the answer to a question if you had already answered the other ones beforehand, right? Okay. I'm not necessarily telling you how to do a test, but I'm just saying that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Okay, enough yakking, and let's go through the things that are on this list. Okay. So the first one's talking about, how do you do when you have grouped a bunch of worksheets together, how does that work? I mean, what happens, what doesn't happen, when do you do it, when do you not do it? Just one of those scenario-based questions like, when is it appropriate that you would, group that kind of stuff? It's one of those kind of simple stuff, kind of a philosophical question, so that's why it's kind of it's not really in the book. I'm not talking about the mechanics of doing it. I'm talking about the reasons why. The next one talks about physically grouping the worksheets, and I'm going to talk to you about some questions. Again, it's more philosophical. It's going to be like, is this the appropriate scenario for using grouped worksheets? Yes or no? Okay, that's a good question. The next one, remember the fill across worksheets? Where, you've got a bunch of worksheets put together and you go up and you hit the little button and you tell one of, so what is that all about? What's it do? How's that different, for example, than just doing copy and paste several times? Is there an advantage? Does copy and paste work that way? And, that kind of question. Well, the next one talks about grouped differences. Remember when we have worksheets grouped, certain things disappear? There's entire menu items that show grayed out. If you can remember those, woohoo, you're in good shape. The next one talks about the 3D reference. Remember now that we have worksheets that are grouped, then it kind of makes like a Z coordinate system. You already have an X and a Y, so now you basically have a Z. So I'm going to ask you to, build me a 3D reference given a scenario. Okay? So you have to write me a formula using a 3D cell reference. The next one talks about the consolidate feature. And one of the things we're going to talk about is, how is it different? What options can you turn on when you're doing a consolidate? For example, making it go to another worksheet and whether or not you have the live links things going on, all those kinds of things. Okay. The next one is talking about linking different workbooks. So this is not necessarily a 3D reference. This is a reference to just an ordinary cell in another worksheet. So once again, I'm going to have one of those things where, which of the following looks like a valid, linked reference. Because remember it's going to have, I said worksheet, didn't I? I meant workbook. So it's going to have like the workbook name and then the worksheet and the cell, and then some of it's going to be exclamations and brackets and single quotes. If you can remember all the combination of all that stuff, that's how you do linking to external workbooks. The next one talks about templates. You remember how you could work up a spreadsheet and get it exactly the way you want it, and then when you're done you can just save it as a template. And so I might ask you, like, how do you do that, or what's the file name extension, or something like that. Okay, next one is in Chapter 8, and it talks about auditing formulas. And so, kind of a philosophical question, what are we trying to do when you audit a formula? I mean, what's the purpose? High-level question on why are we doing this, as an example. The next one is a very specific one about when you're in there doing an evaluate formula. Remember that little evaluate tool? What you can and cannot do from inside that evaluate tool. That'd be a good question. Remember that when we do that evaluate tool, that it'll with the arrows. Remember we had the arrows saying, I'm doing a precedence or kind of a thing where I'm showing all of the inputs coming in, and if it detects a circular reference, is circular reference going to be on things that it depends on, or things that depend on it? Where does a circular reference get determined? The next one is kind of a philosophical question, and it's all about the source data automation. That entire philosophy, those are the terms that I use. There's actually a term called source data automation. It was mentioned briefly in the book, and then they immediately go into input validation. But I want to talk a little bit higher altitude on what is the goal of source data automation as it regards to Excel. Okay, the next one is on data validation. So, for example, I may give you a thing like, here's a person's first name, or here's a city or a state or a zip code. What type of validation would be appropriate? You would go in there and you would tell me, okay, well, you need to do this validation, that validation, that validation. Okay. The next one talks about, remember all the different types of valuations they had? They had whole numbers and decimal numbers, and they had date and list and all those things. If you can remember all those, I'm going to give you a scenario, or you might have to say, under this scenario, this is the most appropriate type of validation, that kind of stuff. The next one talks about, remember when we did macros? And here, when you recorded a macro and what that's all about, what's its purpose, and then maybe you could you would bind it either to a keyboard control or to a button or something like that. Okay, so I'm going to ask you some questions. You're obviously going to do one, but I'm going to ask you what it's all about and how you actually go in there and do that kind of stuff, particularly assigning a macro to a particular key. All right, the next one, I put an asterisk there on the page number, meaning that there's more than one page. So that's like the beginning page. And that is the protection. So there are many different scenarios when you can protect a worksheet, you can protect a workbook, and you can encrypt an entire file. So wonder what scenarios would you choose each one of those. So that's why, because that spans like 5 or 6 pages, I put an asterisk there. Okay, moving on to chapter 9. Now, the first one is the web query thing. Remember how we went to a website and we tried to extract some data from a web page and have it automatically populate inside the Excel document. Ooh, that was cool. I'm going to ask you some questions about that. The next one is about importing an XML file. Remember the whole dance we did where we pulled in an XML file, the machine looked at it and said, hey, I don't see a schema here, but let me build one for you. And so it built a schema, and then we had to go back a second time and extract the data. So I'm going to ask you questions about, what do you have to do when you're importing an XML file. The next one talks about importing text. I'm going to ask you some questions associated with, like, what's the most appropriate file name extension, or which one is comma separated and which one is tab separated. Now, to tell you the honest to God truth, in real life, it doesn't matter what the file extension is. You can have .kumquat and it could be a comma separated file. But I'm saying, if you follow what's in the book, what's the most common association of each one of those types? All right, the next one is cleaning data. You remember how we got some data in? Perhaps it came from an Excel file, perhaps it came from a text file, perhaps it came from whatever. And now that you got it, oh man, is it a mess. And so you have to go in and clean it up some. So I'm going to ask you some questions about those text functions. Which one of the text functions would do this? Or if I give you a scenario saying, here's what it is, and here's what it's supposed to be, what text function did that? Okay, that'd be a good one. The next one is the text to column thing. I kind of like that guy. He does have some limitations. I'm going to specifically talk about one of the weird aspects of that I don't particularly like. The place that I think is kind of dumb. The next one talks about duplicates. Remember how you could go in and set up and find all duplicates and have them removed? There was a little tool for that. And there was another tool that did not remove them, but it just went in and discovered all of the duplicates for you. Okay, if you can remember how we did that, okay, you're in good shape. The next one is talking about the cleaning techniques. So we're in here and we're doing something, and so I put an asterisk there because there's lots of cleaning techniques. Remember, basically there's text functions, and there's the kind of the autofill on steroids thing, the flash fill, which isn't available in 2010, so I really didn't demo it, but we are going to talk about it. And a few of the techniques you can use for doing cleaning techniques. Now, this one may be a little tough. You might have to think a lot about that. I expect probably half the people to kind of miss this question, to tell you the truth. Yes, it's tough. All right. This question is going to be about which one of the techniques actually leaves breadcrumbs behind so that you know how it occurred. For example, if you were to do autofill, right? If I was to grab a thing and zip it down and pull autofill, and then came back afterwards and said, how did you do that? There is no way for me to look at that and tell that you used an autofill to accomplish it. Okay, that's an example. Okay, this is a good place to stop for the 15-minute mark. We'll pick this thing up again in just a few.